In the quiet unraveling of a life shadowed by unspoken regrets, Mara Ellis carries the weight of a love she let slip through her fingers like sea mist. Haunted by the echo of what might have been, she seeks solace in confessions that bridge the gap between blame and forgiveness, stepping into a space where hidden truths flicker to life. The interview room hummed with the low whir of the tape recorder. The interview room hummed with the low whir of the tape recorder, its red light blinking like a hesitant heartbeat. Mara sat across from the stranger, a woman named Elise, mid-40s, with salt-streaked hair and eyes shadowed by old storms. The coastal fog pressed against the window, muting the world outside to a gray haze. Mara clutched her notebook, her fingers tracing the edge where she'd scribbled prompts, but her own story clawed at her throat, unspoken. "Tell me about the note," Mara said, her voice steady but thin, despair coiling in her chest like damp rope. She hit record, the tape spool turning with a soft click, capturing not just words, but the weight of them. Elise leaned forward, hands folding over a crumpled tissue. "It was a goodbye I never meant to send. To my sister, after our fight. I wrote it in a fury. You're dead to me," thinking it'd force her hand. But I hit send too soon, and she vanished for years. I thought it'd make her see my pain, but it just buried us both. Her voice cracked, raw with the echo of that mistake. Regrets like that fog out there. Blinds you, then clears just enough to show the cliffs. Mara nodded, the words slicing into her own fractures. Jonah's face flickered in her mind. The night she'd whispered doubts into his ear, not as confession, but as a wedge. Her betrayal, small and sharp, had splintered them. She could feel the tape winding, etching Elise's truth into spools that might one day hold her own. But when Elise turned the question back, "And you? What's the farewell you're chasing?" Mara's pulse spiked, internal walls rising like tide barriers. "It's complicated," Mara evaded, glancing at the recorder. Its hum filled the silence, a mechanical confessor. Despair tugged harder. Why bear it all, when admitting fault might shatter her further? Yet Elise's story lingered. A mirror. That note hadn't erased the sister, just the bridge. "I hurt someone," Mara murmured finally, the words slipping out unbidden, softening the knot in her gut. "A letter. Words I can't unsay. But hearing you, it makes me wonder if owning it doesn't have to mean losing everything." Elise's gaze softened. No judgment, just shared salt. The tape clicked on, relentless. For the first time, Mara's voice on it didn't sound like accusation. It sounded like a beginning, wary hope flickering through the despair like sun-piercing fog. What if guilt confessed didn't devour her, but lightened the load? The question hung, unanswered, as the spool turned. As the echoes of that interview faded, Mara sought solitude in the quiet corners of the city, drawn to places where stories lingered unspoken. The library's air hangs thick with dust-moted sunlight, filtering through tall, arched windows onto shelves that sag like weary shoulders. Mara moves through the stacks, her camera bag slung over one arm, notebook in hand, scouting quiet corners for interview spots, places where confessions might echo without intrusion. The coastal city hums faintly outside, gulls crying over salt spray, distant waves gnawing at the shore. She feels detached, a director mapping her own unraveling life, emotions tucked away like props in a case. Her fingers trail spines of forgotten volumes, poetry anthologies, yellowed journals, until she pauses at a low shelf in the history section. Tucked between bindings, half fallen, lies a slim bundle. Old letters, tied with frayed ribbon, as if someone abandoned them mid-breath. She hesitates, then pulls them free. The paper crinkles softly, edges curled from years of neglect. One envelope bears a looping script. "To my dearest, forgive the distance." Another, postmarked from a decade ago, whispers of regrets unspoken. Mara's breath catches, but she straightens, glancing at the small camera on her tripod nearby, rolling for ambient footage, capturing the process. She won't let it see, not the way her thumb traces the ink, not the sudden prickle behind her eyes. These aren't hers, yet they mirror fragments. Jonah's handwriting in her mind, words she never sent back. She blinks hard, forcing numbness, detachment as armor. It wasn't all me, she thinks. Voice internal, steadying. Circumstances, timing, his silences too. The lie settles like fog, convincing her the fracture was shared fault, not her solitary shove. That evening, as the weight of the day's discoveries settled heavier, an unexpected interruption arrived at her door. The salt-laced air clung to Mara's skin as she paused in the dim hallway of her apartment, the weight of another sleepless night pressing down like fog off the cliffs. Exhaustion blurred the edges of her thoughts, a dull ache that had become her constant companion since the fracture. She hadn't expected the knock, sharp, insistent, echoing through the quiet like a half-remembered argument. Through the peephole, Theo stood there, his silhouette familiar, yet altered by time. Shoulders hunched against the coastal chill, dark hair tousled by the wind. Her hand hovered on the knob, fatigue rooting her in place. What now? She turned it anyway, the door creaking open like a reluctant confession, framing him in the threshold between her guarded world and the one they'd shattered. "Mara," he said, voice low, edged with the old gravel. His eyes, shadowed by stubble and unspoken years, met hers without flinching. "I saw your footage online. The confessions. It's raw, powerful. I want in. A joint shoot. Us, talking it out on tape. For the project. For closure." The word closure hung between them, stirring the embers of what she'd buried. Tiredness ebbed into something sharper, a tense knot uncoiling in her chest, anxiety threading through her veins like the incoming tide. She gripped the doorframe, the wood cool and unyielding under her palm, a barrier she wasn't ready to cross. Flashbacks flickered, his laugh in the dim light of their shared bed, the night she chose silence over truth, letting the love they'd built slip through her fingers like sand. "Why now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt, stepping back just enough to let the space between them breathe. No accusations. She wouldn't let it devolve there. No retreat into the silence that had doomed them before. The door remained ajar, a symbolic hinge between retreat and reckoning, inviting the past to spill in. Theo shifted, rain-damp coat brushing the frame. "Because ignoring it hasn't worked. Your tapes, they made me see my side too. The scars we both carry. We could record it here, now. Honest. No scripts." Her pulse quickened, anxiety blooming full now, a taut wire pulling her toward the edge. The cliffs outside her window loomed in her mind, precipitous, unforgiving. Working with him meant peeling back layers she'd only just begun to mend. Could it heal, or just reopen the wounds, raw and bleeding anew? She swallowed, the air thick with salt and possibility. "All right," she said finally, gesturing him inside, the door swinging wider. "But we record every word, no edits." As he crossed the threshold, the tension crackled, boundaries redrawn in the space of a breath. Fragile, electric, demanding truth. In the days that followed, seeking further clarity amid the rising tide of emotions. Mara turned to her trusted friend for grounding. The room smelled of salt and stale coffee, the kind that clung to the coastal fog seeping through the cracked window. Mara sat hunched on the edge of the worn couch, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater like a lifeline. Across from her, Cam leaned forward in the armchair, eyes steady, not accusatory, but insistent, like the tide pulling at the shore. "Talk to me, Mara," Cam said, voice low and even. "Not the vague stuff, the real regrets, the ones that keep you up at night. Write them down. Make a list. Right now." Mara's chest tightened, a familiar lock clicking shut inside her. She glanced at the blank notebook Cam had slid across the coffee table earlier, its pages mocking her with their emptiness. A list, as if sorrow could be itemized, boxed up like groceries. Her mind raced to the safe corners. The weather, the city's relentless hum, anything but the fracture she'd carved into her own heart. Jonah's face flickered unbidden, his laugh fading into silence after that night, the betrayal she'd sown like salt in fertile ground. I can't just," Mara started, words fumbling, her arms crossing tighter over her ribs. Closed off, armored, the fear pulsed. Once she named it, spilled the ink, control would slip, and the world would see the mess she'd made of love. Cam didn't budge. "You can, and you will, because hiding it, that's what got you here, staring at cliffs instead of climbing them. Start with the night you chose silence over truth, or the mornings you woke up pretending it didn't hurt him as much as it wrecked you." The pen trembled in Mara's hand as she finally picked it up, the notebook's spine cracking open like a confession. Bullet points began to form, hesitant at first. "Pushed Jonah away when he needed me most. Hid the doubt instead of facing it. Let fear turn love into a ghost." Each word unearthed a shard, sharp and raw, her breath shallow as the walls of her isolation cracked. The list grew, a stark table of truths, no excuses, no softening edges. Just her, exposed, the emotion uncoiling from a tight knot into something vulnerable, alive. Cam watched, nodding faintly. "See, it's not a cage, it's a map." Mara's eyes lingered on the page, the weight shifting, not lighter, but shared. Was she ready to own this pain, to trace its lines without shattering? The question hung, unanswered, as the fog thickened outside. Alone later that night, the list's truths stirred deeper reflections, pulling Mara back into the memories she'd long avoided. The camera lingers on Mara's face in the dim glow of her apartment, her eyes distant, unfocused, as if peering through layers of fogged time. She sits cross-legged on the worn rug, a half-empty mug of tea cooling in her hands, steam long dissipated. The air hums with the low drone of the city beyond the window, waves crashing faintly against the cliffs, a reminder of edges she can't quite step back from. Cut to flashback, late autumn evening, the kind where the coastal chill seeps through double-paned glass. Mara and Theo in their shared loft, the space cluttered with film reels and script pages, her latest project bleeding into every corner. She's at the desk, laptop screen casting blue shadows across her features, fingers flying over keys. A notification pings. Another shoot offer, urgent, promising the break she's chased for years. Theo approaches from the kitchen, his silhouette soft in the lamplight, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He sets one down beside her, his hand brushing her shoulder, warm and tentative. She doesn't look up. "This could be it, Theo. The director. They want me on location next week. It's huge." His smile falters, but he leans in, tracing the line of her jaw with a fingertip. "We could celebrate. turn off the screen for one night. His voice is a gentle pull, laced with the salt of their shared mornings, the way he'd wake her with coffee, and whispers against the sea's roar. Instead, she nods absently, already scrolling through emails. The distance begins there, invisible at first, like breath on cold glass. Theo steps to the window, overlooking the blurred city lights, and presses his palm against the pane. Condensation blooms under his touch, the glass fogging from the warmth inside, clashing with the frost outside. Mara glances up then, sees the print of his hand, fingers splayed, reaching for something beyond the barrier. She rises, drawn by the sight, and joins him. Her own hand overlays his, but hers trembles slightly, pulled by the pull of ambition. Their lips meet briefly, a spark in the chill, but her phone buzzes again. Confirmation from the production team. She pulls away, murmuring apologies into the dark. Just this once. It'll get easier. Theo's print lingers on the glass as she turns back to her work, the fog slowly clearing around it, exposing the smudged outline of what they were. Back in the present, Mara's breath catches. The memory uncoils in her chest, warm at first, like the nostalgia of his scent, sandalwood and sea spray. Then, twisting sharp into guilt, she sets the mug down, hands pressing against her thighs, as if to steady the ache. Why did she let the work eclipse them? The shoot that followed stretched weeks into months. Calls unanswered, intimacy frayed, like rope against rock. Theo's distance grew because she built it, brick by email, night by deadline. Regret mirrors back. Her achievements, polished and framed, but the love they displaced, smeared and fading. Can she admit it now, that the career she prized shattered the closeness they nurtured? The question hangs, unanswered, in the quiet room, as Mara's gaze drifts to her own window, where her breath fogs the glass, leaving faint, fleeting marks. With those memories resurfacing, Mara soon faced Theo, again in a more structured setting, guided by her confidant. The camera lingers on Mara's face in the dim interview room, salt-tanged air seeping through the cracked window like an uninvited memory. She's perched on the edge of her chair, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor, a fortress of alienation, her regret a private storm she won't let breach. Across from her, Theo sits, his voice, recorder between them, like a fragile bridge. Lena's in the corner, silent, her presence a steady pulse. Theo clears his throat, the sound raw against the quiet. It started with the coldness, he says, his words measured, like stones dropped into still water. Not the betrayal. That came later, sharp as a cliff edge. But before, when you'd pull away, I'd reach for you, Mara, and find nothing. Like I was talking to the sea, endless but empty. His gaze meets hers, unflinching, and she flinches, the echo of her own chill hitting her gut. She wants to look away, to rebuild the wall, but his voice pulls her in. Internal tension coils tighter. Her mind screams justifications, but they stick in her throat, forbidden, tasting like salt and shame. Theo pauses, a vocal hitch, breath caught mid-sentence, the silence stretching like the horizon beyond the cliffs. In that gap, she hears it. Not just his pain, but hers, mirrored back, the way she'd frozen Jonah out years ago, mirroring this very fracture. Her coldness hadn't just wounded, it had been born from her own unraveling trauma. The love she'd let slip like sand through fingers. The pause breaks him. I regret not fighting harder, he continues, softer now. But mostly, I regret carrying it alone. Thought it was all on me. The failure to hold on. His eyes soften, inviting without demanding. Mara's defenses crack. The isolation of her self-blame fractures. For the first time, guilt feels shared, a dialogue unfolding in the space between them. Empathy stirs, tentative, as the weight lightens. Not gone, but divided. She nods, barely, her voice a whisper. I hear that. Alienation ebbs into acknowledgement. The room warmer, the seas murmur outside a gentle underscore. But as Theo leans back, spent, the question hangs. Has she truly grasped it? That their guilts entwine, no longer solitary burdens to bear alone. Seeking a way to transform that shared vulnerability into something tangible, Mara turned to an unexpected collaborator. The studio hummed with the faint scrape of glass on wood, salt-tanged air slipping through the cracked window like a hesitant breath. Mara stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her gaze skimming the cluttered space. Canvases leaned like forgotten promises, tools scattered in quiet disarray. Raphael knelt amid the fragments, his hands steady as he fitted shards into place. He looked up, eyes catching the dim light, and gestured her closer. See? He said, voice low, almost reverent. The installation sprawled across the floor, a mosaic of mirrors, pieced from what she'd once shattered in a fit of rage years ago. Edges gleamed jagged, then softened where they'd fused, tiny welds of silver wire binding the breaks. Reflections danced fractured across the surface, her face, splintered, the coastal cliffs beyond the window, etched in miniature waves. It wasn't whole, not yet, but it pulsed with possibility, each fragment holding light instead of devouring it. Mara's throat tightened. She wanted to turn away, to bury the ache that clawed at her chest, the old lie whispering that apologies were all she had left, not creation. What if adding her piece meant exposing the raw edges of her regret, the betrayal with Jonah that still echoed in her bones? Standing here, beside Raphael's quiet offering, felt like stepping onto those cliffs. One wrong move, and she'd tumble back into the void. It's beautiful, she murmured, but her feet rooted, wary shadows pooling in her eyes. But why me? I break things, Raphael. I don't mend. He rose, wiping dust from his palms, and held out a small, uncut mirror shard, smooth on one side, her initials etched faintly on the back from some long-lost journal. Because reconciliation isn't solo. You've carried your story alone too long. Add this. Let it reflect not just the fracture, but what comes after. His words hung, gentle pressure against her walls. She took the shard, fingers trembling as its cool weight settled in her palm. Images flickered. The night she'd erased that confession tape, Jonah's fading silhouette, letters yellowing in the library stacks. Could she etch her truth here, not as penance, but as a spark? The mosaic waited, its mirrors multiplying her hesitation into 1,000 wary glances. Slowly, she knelt, pressing the shard into a gap near the center. It clicked into place, and light bloomed, cautious, threading through the cracks like dawn over the sea. Raphael nodded, a soft alliance forming in the space between them. Mara's breath eased, hope flickering tentative as the reflections shifted, piecing her not as villain, but maker. Yet the question lingered, sharp as an unset edge. Could she truly stop hiding the pain behind endless sorries and let these fragments form something new? With that tentative step toward creation, Mara delved deeper into her core regrets in another session, confronting the heart of her betrayal. The camera's red light blinks like a heartbeat, unblinking in the dim interview room. Mara sits rigid on the worn leather chair, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater, the salt-tanged air from the open window doing little to ease the knot in her chest. June leans against the wall, arms crossed, her presence a quiet anchor. Therapist, confidant, witness. No script, just the lens, and the truth Mara has dodged for months. I thought it was just a moment, Mara starts. Voice thin, defensive edges sharpening her words. She glances at June, then away, eyes flicking to the cliffs visible through the glass, jagged against the fading sunset. Jonah and we were building something real. Late nights scripting scenes, his hand on mine during rehearsals. But I let it crack. I chose that night. The party, the drinks, the stranger's pull. Because part of me wanted to feel alive outside of us. Not because of him or the pressure, because of me. The words hang, heavy. June nods once, her gaze steady, urging without words. Mara's breath catches. She wants to pivot, blame the fog of exhaustion, the city's relentless hum. But the camera rolls on, capturing the flicker in her eyes, the way her shoulders hunch as if bracing for judgment. Forbidden silence looms, but she pushes through, the recording a merciless mirror. It wasn't a slip. I knew what I was doing, she admits, softer now, the defense cracking like sea foam on rocks. Her voice trembles, not with excuse, but raw exposure. The I, finely uttered, not a shield, but scalpel. June shifts, a subtle lean forward, trust threading the air between them. The lens whirs faintly, etching the shift, from armored regret to the ache of ownership. Mara exhales, meeting the camera's eye. Understanding stirs, tentative in the quiet. Can this I unravel the knot, or just tighten it? The red light pulses, waiting, building on that raw exposure. Mara confronted Theo once more, this time with mutual confessions unfolding. The camera's red light blinks like a hesitant heartbeat in the dim interview room. Salt air seeping through the cracked window, carrying the faint crash of waves from the cliffs beyond. Mara sits across from Theo, their chairs angled just enough to frame them both. Two figures, etched in the soft glow of the lens. The tape whirring softly, capturing every breath, every flicker of shadow on their faces. She clutches a folded note in her lap, her fingers tracing its edges as if it might unravel her. Theo's eyes, once warm with shared secrets, now hold a guarded depth. The grudge they've nursed for months, etched in the lines around his mouth. I have to say it, Mara starts, her voice steady, but laced with the tremor of held-back tears. The words feel exposed under the camera's unblinking eye. No room for evasion. I chose silence that night. Theo, when you needed me to fight for us, I let fear win. It wasn't just a mistake. It was me, turning away because I couldn't face my own fractures. She doesn't look away, though the admission burns, her chest tightening with the old resentment she's carried, like an anchor. Theo shifts, his jaw clenching, the air between them thick with unspoken accusations they've both forbidden themselves today. He nods slowly, unfolding his own confession, the paper crinkling like dry leaves. And I held on to the hurt like it defined me. He replies, his tone raw, the grudge cracking at the edges. I blamed you for everything, the way our love splintered. But I see now how I built walls first, pushing you out before you even left. It wasn't betrayal alone, it was us, unraveling in the quiet. His words hang, not as weapons, but as bridges. The tape rolling on, witnessing the shift from armored pain to this fragile openness. Mara's breath catches. She leans forward slightly, the spatial pull between them widening even as respect blooms. For his scars, mirroring her own. They pause. The room's hush broken only by the recorder's hum. A mechanical confessor sealing their truths. No accusations fly, no silences swallow the moment. Instead, sincerity softens the edges. a gentle meeting where regret meets understanding. Mara feels the guilt loosen its grip, transforming into something honest, not shattering. Theo's gaze softens, a nod of farewell forming on his lips. As the camera captures her final, unretouched exhale, the question lingers. Can these words, etched on tape, truly close the past without blame's shadow? From those bridges of understanding, Mara returned to the studio, where collaboration deepened into a shared vision for redemption. The studio hummed with the low whir of old tape decks, salt-streaked windows framing the distant cliffs like a half-remembered dream. Mara knelt amid scattered reels and faded letters, her fingers tracing the edge of a fogged-up photo from Theo's loft. Ambition's ghost, smudged and insistent. Raphael stood across the cluttered table, his dark eyes sharp under the slanted light, sketching wireframe outlines for their installation. Regrets woven into hope, a sonic archway of confessions leading to those precarious coastal edges. "It's got to bleed honesty," Mara said, her voice threading doubt like frayed wire. She pushed the photo aside, heart stuttering. "No pretty filters. If I mask it as art, it's just another excuse. Hiding how I let Jonah slip, how work devoured Theo. The tapes, the letters, the cliff echoes. They have to raw dog the truth." Raphael paused, charcoal smudging his palm as he leaned in, tension coiling between them like the incoming tide. "Raw is fine, Mara, but structure it wrong, and it screams justification. You want visitors walking those cliffs in our piece? Make it a path, not a scream. Blend the archives, your erased confession reel with those library letters, the crash of waves under the recordings. But if it's all self-flagellation, it traps you. Hope isn't superficial. It's the thread pulling you forward." She recoiled, doubt flooding her chest. A familiar paralysis. Hands trembling, she cued a tape, her own voice, young and fractured, spilling the betrayal night with Jonah. The room filled with it, halting words, breaths like breaking waves. "See? That's me, unedited. But can I build on this without lying to myself? Without pretending the regret's just material?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he crossed to the deck, layering in the cliff sounds. Wind-whipped silence, gravel underfoot, the vast hush after a confession's echo. They worked in tandem now, actions syncing. Her splicing clips of fogged windows and reclaimed mirrors, him rigging speakers to pulse the quiet pauses between her admissions. Tension thrummed. Their shoulders brushed as they hauled driftwood frames, mimicking the precipice's edge. "Try it," he urged, voice low. "Speak into the void here. No script." Mara hesitated, then leaned into the mic. "I chose the shoot over Theo's hand on the glass. I let ambition eclipse us." The words hung, and in the aftermath, silence bloomed. Not accusatory, but supportive. A canvas absorbing the spill. It wrapped her like sea mist, steadying the shake in her limbs. Doubt ebbed. She saw it now, the installation taking shape. Each scene, a marked step, toward Jonah's indirect letter, the beach walk unfiltered. Raphael nodded, respect etching his features, no longer observer but co-creator, trust solidifying in the shared labor. As they stepped back, the piece pulsed alive, regret's archive transforming under that newfound quiet. A creative surge. Mara felt it shift inside her, self-perception tilting, no longer broken shards, but a mosaic. Could she truly pour her path into this, sincere to the core? The question lingered, unanswered, as the tide whispered on.